see everyone tonight. I hope that you brought your Bibles because we are continuing our study in the book of Proverbs. And we're going to be in the book of Proverbs in chapter 9. Proverbs chapter 9. You know, God tells us so many things over and over and over again for our learning. It is wonderful that God has stressed the importance to us of godly wisdom and how important it is for us to have godly wisdom. He tells us to be wise as serpents, but still to be harmless as doves. It's important for us to have that wisdom, but to use that wisdom in the right way, isn't it? So look with me in Proverbs chapter 9 and verse 1. He says, "Wisdom has built her house. She has hewn her 7 pillars. She has built the perfect foundation. She has the perfect setup waiting." Wisdom, it says, verse 2, "She has slaughtered her beasts. She has mixed her wine. She has also set her table. She has sent out her young women to call from the highest places in the town. Whoever is simple, let him turn in here." If you're lacking wisdom, wisdom calls to you. Wisdom says, if you're struggling with learning, come to me. If you're struggling with finding the truth, come to me. If you're struggling with whatever you're struggling with in life, wisdom says, turn to it. Because wisdom comes from where? God. So wisdom says, whoever is struggling, all has been prepared. Whatever you want to know, it is there for you to know. All has been prepared. Her voice calls out to all who will listen. She even calls out to the foolish. "Foolish, listen to my voice." To him who lacks sense, she says, "Come, eat of my bread and drink of the wine I have mixed. Leave your simple ways and live, and walk in the way of insight." God does not desire us to live in ignorance. One of the most common sayings you hear in the world today is, "Ignorance is bliss." But ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance leads to destruction. Ignorance is one of the most dangerous things we will ever face in life. When you think about what Christ said, when He said He will return in flaming fire, taking vengeance on them who what? Know not God, and who obey not the gospel. To think about that for a moment, ignorance will set us in a position that is in direct conflict with God. Ignorance will destroy us. Ignorance is destructive. God calls us to leave ignorance. He calls us to leave foolishness. He calls us to stop acting in ignorant ways and start acting like we have wisdom. Because that's important, isn't it? Whoever, he says, corrects a scoffer gets himself abuse. And whoever reproves a wicked man incurs injury. When you correct a loud and foolish person, guess what they're going to do? They're going to get angry. They're going to lash out. They're going to call you names. If you say homosexuality is a sin, be ready to be called a bigot. If you say that drinking alcohol is a sin, be ready to be called judgy. If you say that sin is sin, expect it to be assault by the world. Because the world doesn't want to hear it. The world says when we go after a scoffer, and a scoffer is someone who says, "I don't care what God says. I want to do what I want to do, and you can't stop me." That's a scoffer. He says when you correct a person that way, just be prepared, because that person is not going to magically go, "Aha, I got it. All lights on deck. Let me change my ways." He says that person has already made up their mind. The moment you say something to them, it's war. It's on. They're ready to fight. So he says when you correct a scoffer, you're going to get abuse. When you reprove the wicked man, expect injury. Because the wicked man, the one who is a scoffer, would rather be right in his own eyes than be right in the eyes of God. So he says in verse 8, "Do not reprove a scoffer, or he will hate you. Reprove a wise man, and he will love you. Reproving the foolish will result in hate and anger. Therefore," he says, "leave them alone in their willful ignorance." Wow. It reminds me, if you go back to the book of Romans, where God said they kept on in their sin, they wanted their sin, and God said what? "I turn them over to their sin." If that's what you want, have at it. If it's that important to you, engage in it. But know every action, what? Has consequences. So he says, do not reprove a scoffer, but reprove a wise man of mistakes, and he will love you. You know, if you reprove someone who is wise, they'll be happy you reproved them. If you correct someone who is wise, they will be happy that you corrected them. You know why? Because they want to be right in the eyes of God. He would rather be right with God than right with himself. Reprove a wise man, and he will love you for it. He says, give instruction to a wise man, and he will still be wiser. Teach a righteous man, and he will increase in learning. Giving instruction to a wise man will make him even more wise. Teaching a righteous man will increase his learning. Those who love God more than themselves will receive the truth. Because that's wisdom. God desires from us to be a wise people. God wants us to be a people like King David. He wants us to be a people like King Solomon. He wants us to be a people like Paul. He wants us to be a people like Peter. But most of all, he wants us to be a people like him. A people who follow and imitate his wisdom. Verse 10, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. You ever heard that before? This is where wisdom comes from. It begins with the fearing of God. And the knowledge of the Holy One is insight. This is the important start to everything. Before I ever do anything right, I have to understand why I'm doing something right. I can save all the people in the world, but you know what? If I did not teach them the truth, what good did I accomplish? The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. It is the beginning of everything, isn't it? Fear the Lord. Reject the Lord, and it will be calamity. Perhaps that is one of the reasons Christians are most afraid when we see the way things are turning out in our nation. Because we understand as we look back through history what happens to a nation who completely and totally rejects the God of heaven. We see it over and over and over. What happened to Babylon? Babylon was knocked off of its pedestal. Well, why was it knocked off of its pedestal? Because it was as sinful as all get out. That's why. Assyria, Persia, Greece, Rome. Why were they knocked down? The children of Israel even. Why were they knocked down? Rampant sin. And some people say, well, that's the world. We don't have to worry about that. That doesn't affect us. Well, remember when the Lord roared? He roared against Tyre. That wasn't the children of Israel, was it? He roared against Sidon. That wasn't the children of Israel. He said, well, for one thing, yea, for two things, even for three, I'll destroy you. If he was to go only by 3 strikes, how quickly would we have gone down if he only gave us 3 strikes as a nation? The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, because the Lord is the beginning of all. Because the Lord is the greatest of all. That's one of the things we looked at this morning, isn't it? To truly understand who he is. As he says in verse 11, for by me your days will be multiplied, and years will be added to your life. The Lord, being as great as he is and as powerful as he is, says, I can lengthen your days and I can shorten your days. Which one do you want? That's power, isn't it? Which one of us can say, I'm going to add days to my life this week. I don't feel like dying next week. None of us have that power, do we? Like Jesus said, which one of us can turn the color of our hair a different color just by thinking about it? Which one of us can make ourselves taller or shorter just by thinking about it? None of us have that power, do we? But God said here, by me your days will be multiplied and years will be added to your life. God says, I have the power to do anything I please. If I want to turn that ocean into a hole, I will. Because he has the power to do it, doesn't he? He says, if you are wise for yourself. If you scoff, you alone will bear it. And then he talks about the lack of wisdom. He said, the woman folly is loud. Ignorance itself shouts like wisdom, hoping to be heard. He says, over here you hear wisdom shouting, come to me, come to me. And over here you hear ignorance shouting as well. No, no, come to me, come to me. She is seductive and knows nothing. She sits at the door of her house. She takes a seat on the highest place of town, calling those who pass by, who are going straight on their way. Whoever is simple, let him turn in here. If you're foolish, come in here and I'll keep you that way. If you're ignorant, come here and I'll make sure I keep you that way. There's no need to change. It's like so many denominations in the world today. Come as you are, leave as you came. There's nothing to change, no reason to change. Why would there be? Once saved, always saved. Boom, you're in. All you had to do was believe and don't do anything else. You're good the rest of your life. That's not biblical faith, is it? And it's certainly not a biblical teaching. The foolish are told to come here. Stay foolish. Don't ever look. Don't ever listen. Don't ever learn, because if you learn, you will leave. Do you know who's pulling the strings of ignorance? Satan himself. That's who pulls the string of ignorance. Don't believe me? Thou shalt not surely die. What does he want them to do? He wants them to disobey God. He wants them to be a people separated from God. Notice how it phrases it in verse 16. And to him who lacks sense. What a way to say it. To someone who lacks sense, she says, stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. All sin is good. Sin is great. Let me show you how great it is. Let me show you how wonderful it is. But in Isaiah 5 and verse 20 it says, woe to him that calls evil good and good evil. He warns us, doesn't he? What happens when we say that evil things are good and good things are evil? Do we have a problem with that in our nation today? We have a very big problem with that in our nation today. Alcoholism, drugs, you name it, it's in. You can say it this way. In the United States, sin is in. It's popular. But to say I'm a Christian, that is fighting words for some reason today. Have you noticed that? Just tell someone, walk up to a random stranger and say, hey, I'm a Christian. Let me tell you about Christ. And watch what happens. It's a war. But if you walk up to half the people and say, hey, here's a beer, you want one? You're their best friend. What's the difference? Ignorance. Willful, scoffing ignorance. He says in verse 18, but he does not know that the dead are there, that her guests are in the depths of Sheol. What a statement. He says the ignorant one that listens to ignorance, that lives in ignorance and walks in ignorance and has no other desire than to stay in their ignorance, doesn't even understand that his own fellow followers are in the depths of hell, and he won't see it until he opens his eyes and desires more than foolishness. What a serious, thought-provoking statement from our God. Do you think that would describe most of the world today? Wandering through life, they wake up, they go through the same task that they went through the day before. There's no variance. There's no decision to say, I will choose God today. There's nothing in their life that leads them to that conclusion, because they've already written it off as a fairy tale. They've already written it off as something not real. They've already written it off as something they will not change, they will not obey. He says they don't even know their own destination because they put on blind. You ever see horses, when they put them on the street, they have those blinders on the side. He says they put the blinders on themselves to say, I don't see it, I don't see it. Like an ostrich sticking its head in the sand. I don't see it. If I don't look at it, it's not there. But the reality doesn't change, does it? Reality is reality whether I like it or not. No one has the power to overrule God. God is the most powerful being that has ever existed, ever will exist, isn't He? He is the smartest being that has ever existed and ever will exist, isn't He? He is the creator and author of wisdom. He is the Almighty God. So who am I to stand in front of Him and say, you're not right? Because on the judgment day it said people will stand up and argue with Him. Can you imagine that? To stand up and say, wait a minute, I know more than you. You got this wrong. What is that? If it's not scoff. What is that if it's not willful ignorance? Who would dare to challenge God? We know one who dares to challenge God. His name is Satan. And his eternity has been set. His eternity has been set because he is a scoffer. He is an accuser. He is our enemy. He is alive today. He did not die. He's still alive today. He promotes ignorance. He promotes foolishness. He promotes sin. And He does not want us to be wise. One of the things that He tells us over and over and over and over and over again, that if we want to be wise, we'll listen to His voice, we'll read His words, and we will put on the whole armor of God, that we may stand against the wiles of the devil, against his fiery darts, against his false teachers, against his wolves in sheep's clothing. Because that is what we must do as Christians. Stand against our enemy. We cannot embrace sin, can we? Sin is destructive. Sin multiplies. Like a disease we want to get rid of. We have to watch for our souls, don't we? We have to watch for each other's souls, don't we? Each one of us are responsible for each other. Can you think of the arrogant statement that Cain made when God asked him about his brother? Am I my brother's keeper? Yes, you're your brother's keeper. Well, of course you are. Why wouldn't you be? Family looks out for family, doesn't it? So as a brother, I am my brother's keeper, right? Does that make me be judgy? No. Does that turn me into a bigot because I disagree? No. It turns me into a concerned, loving brother. You know, if you truly hated someone, you'd never tell them the gospel. Because they would go to hell. They would be separated from God forever because they never heard the gospel. That's what it means to truly hate someone. To truly love someone is to teach them the words of God. The wisdom that comes from God. Words were spoken. He said He was going to tell him words that will make him wise unto salvation. Is you think wisdom is important? Because wisdom plays a part in our going to heaven. Because it plays a part in who we are as Christians. God desires of us to be a wise people, not to be deceived. Because a wise person is not carried about with every wind of false doctrine that comes this way and every wind that comes that way. We are like a tree planted by the rivers of water that cannot be moved when we are wise in the knowledge of our God. Perhaps there's someone here tonight that needs to become a New Testament Christian. It is so very important for you to be planted into Christ. Buried with Him in baptism. raised to walk in newness of life, a new creature who opens their eyes for the first time, born again, child of God. Are you here tonight needing to obey the gospel? Or perhaps you're here tonight and you've been struggling with sin, struggling to become wise in a wicked world. Then there is no better time than right now to make that decision. Come now, while we stand.
There's a fountain free, 'tis for you and me. Let us